Hello, and thank you for listening to this episode of the Moore's October Rants. Today's episode is going to be titled People Who Pick and Choose What's a Big Deal and What's Not. I know I've talked about this before, probably in one of my videos, and I'm sure I've mentioned it a few times here and there, but it's something that's been on my mind a lot lately. And honestly, it's a topic worth revisiting because it's something that really happens to so many of us. People tend to have this habit of picking and choosing what they think is a big deal and what isn't. It's like they decide, based on their own perspective, what matters, and then brush off everything else that doesn't seem significant to them. It's not even about the situation itself sometimes. It's about how personally involved they feel in it, or how it affects their own lives directly. I see this kind of thing all the time, and it really stands out to me when people have these strong reactions to something that happens to them. But if the same thing happens to someone else, they act like it's no big deal. It's a classic case of inconsistency. It happens constantly. Someone goes through something and thinks it's huge, maybe even life-changing, but if that same thing were to happen to someone else, they couldn't care less. They might even laugh it off or say it's not important. It's like they have this internal filter where only certain things are worth their time or energy, and it's all based on how much it affects them directly. Take me, for example. If I feel strongly about something, let's say theft or injustice or any kind of wrongdoing, I'm not going to flip-flop on how I feel based on who it happens to. If I think it's wrong when it happens to me, I'll feel just as strongly about it if it happens to someone I care about, or even to a stranger. I try my best to be consistent with how I react to situations. If someone in my family were to get robbed, I'd feel just as upset as if I were the one who had my stuff taken. It doesn't change just because it's not me in the situation. It's the principle of it. But what's frustrating is that a lot of people don't operate that way. They'll say things like, "I'm against theft," or "I don't support bullying," or "I'm all about fairness." But when it comes down to it, if it's happening to someone else, they don't seem to care as much. It's like they're selective with their empathy and moral stance. We see this happen on a larger scale, too. Think about something as serious as school shootings. People often don't seem to care about it, at least not in a meaningful way, until it happens in their own community or to someone they know. It's always easy to share a hashtag or post about how something needs to change when it's just a distant news story, but the real concern only seems to show up when it's no longer a news story, but something that directly impacts them. People want to make noise about change and reform when they feel threatened by it, but until then, it's like they're perfectly content to sit back and let things slide. Sure, they'll talk about how tragic it is, but it's not until it happens right in front of them that they feel that real sense of urgency. That's the thing that gets me. It's not that people don't care, it's just that their care is only activated when they're personally affected. And I get it to some degree, we're all selfish by nature, but it doesn't make it any easier to watch. And that brings me to something that stayed with me since a while back. I've shared this story before, but it really drives home this whole point. I was in the car with my dad one day, and he accidentally got the car stuck in a ditch. It wasn't a huge deal in the end. We called for help, got the car out, and went on with our day. But the whole time I couldn't help but think to myself, if I had been the one to get the car stuck, he would have flipped out. It would have been this huge, dramatic thing. But because it was him, he was so chill about it. He laughed it off, didn't make a fuss, and just moved on. It wasn't that big of a deal to him. And that's the thing, it wasn't a huge issue because he didn't treat it like one. If I had done the same thing, though, the energy would have been completely different. That's just how people are. They don't keep the same energy when it comes to other people's situations compared to their own. It's like they can't view the problem through the lens of the other person. It's frustrating, but I've learned to accept it for what it is. It's human nature, I guess. People care about what directly impacts them. They can talk a good game about how they're against this or that, but when it's not their problem, it's easy for them to act like it's not important. I've tried to stay consistent, though, and this is something I really value. If I think something is wrong, whether it's theft, violence, bullying, or any kind of injustice, I don't change how I feel about it just because it's not happening to me. My principles stay the same. I'm not naive enough to think that everyone will see things the way I do. Honestly, I know a lot of people won't, and that's fine. It's just the reality. I can't force other people to care about things they don't want to care about. But I've made a point to stick to my beliefs and hold the same energy, even if it feels like I'm the only one doing it. I try to be consistent with the way I react to things because, for me, that's what feels right. I don't want to be the person who only cares when it's affecting me directly. This inconsistency is especially apparent when it comes to bullying. I've had plenty of conversations with people who claim they're against bullying, who say they won't tolerate it, and that they stand up for those who are being mistreated. But then, in the same group chat or conversation, someone will make a joke at my expense or say something hurtful, and those same people who were so vocal about standing up against bullying won't say a word. They won't step in. They won't make it a big deal because it's not happening to them. And that's when it hits me. People say a lot of things, but they don't always back it up with action. It's easy to claim to be against something, but when it comes time to actually stand up for what's right, people often fall short. That's why I've learned not to take everything people say at face value. I take it with a grain of salt, because words are easy, but actions speak a lot louder. It's one thing to say you care about something, but it's a whole different thing to show it consistently through your actions. I think it's important to be cautious about how much stock you put in what people say, especially when their actions don't align with their words. At the end of the day, I make these videos because it helps me work through my thoughts and frustrations. It's not that I think anything is going to change, but it's helpful to get it off my chest and try to make sense of everything. I know that not everyone is going to see things the way I do, and I've accepted that. But what I won't do is let that stop me from staying true to what I believe. If something matters to me, I'll keep that energy consistent, whether it's happening to me, to my family, or to someone else. That's just the way I operate, and I'm not going to change that anytime soon. Anyways, thank you for listening to this episode of the Moore's October Rants. Signing out. Have a good one, guys. Goodbye.